Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm back on the street, businessman on the street, and I'm here today at Green Bank, soon to be Veritex Bank.
Yes, sir.
And I'm visiting with Richard Rector, who's the Senior Vice President here. Richard, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Well, I'm doing well, and I appreciate you taking time to talk to us about a special event that's coming up soon at the Woodlands Chamber. But before we get started, talk a little bit about yourself and the bank and what Green Bank's all about.
Yeah, be happy to. Thanks, Rick. So I've been with Green Bank for about 8 years. It'll be 8 years in May, so that's fast approaching. I've been in banking altogether for 15 years. Started my career on the retail side. And my current boss, Paco Rivera, I worked with him for a large retail bank about 10, 11 years ago. After he came to Green Bank, he remembered us having a conversation where I'd always wanted to kind of come over to the community banking side and see what that was like. And I took him up on that opportunity about 8 years ago, and been here ever since, and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made in my career. So.
Well, that's fantastic. And as I mentioned earlier, the bank is changing names, not only
correct.
changing names, but being acquired, and soon will be Veritex Bank. You've
That
been
is
acquired
correct.
by a larger banking group?
Actually, we were the larger bank in the transaction. It's definitely pretty close to what I would say as a merger of equals. For various reasons, we decided to do the merger in the opposite direction that it typically goes. Even though they're the smaller bank, they are acquiring us. And they're based out of Dallas. They have a very strong presence in the DFW market. We're looking to complement that with our significant Houston presence.
Right.
And we were actually looking to expand in the DFW market as well. So it really was just kind of a match made in heaven, so to speak.
Yeah,
We
well,
really
that sounds
accomplished.
wonderful.
Yep.
But most importantly, we've got a real special event coming up here at the Woodlands Chamber in Montgomery County here, coming up about financing small business. Why don't you give us a little bit of the detail on that, and then we'll talk a little bit about some of the content that'll be in that program. Yeah,
it's going to be April 4th from 9 to 11, and the topic considers securing financing for your small business. And so we'll have a panel consisting of myself and some other bankers, and we'll just be there ready to answer questions from a variety of topics pertaining to obtaining credit for your business, whether you're a startup, whether you're an existing business that's just looking to obtain some kind of financing for the first time. We'll be there to answer those questions.
Well, you know, in my consulting practice, One Best Consultant as a Silver Fox advisor, financing is one of the keystones, really, of getting a business off the ground and developing it. What kind of loans can a small business, not necessarily a startup, but a small business going out for the first time to borrow money, what kind of loans are available to them?
Yeah, there's a pretty wide variety, kind of just depending on what you're looking to do, what your objectives are. You can finance inventory, you can finance accounts receivable, you can finance equipment, you can finance real estate. If your business is growing, you're taking on new and large contracts, but there's usually some cash flow tightness in that growth stage that you need to overcome, and so a bank can be a great partner to help you kind of fund that expansion and fund those growth opportunities. Oftentimes you need to, like I said, you need additional capital to buy equipment, to hire additional people, maybe expand your facility. Lots of different reasons why in a growth scenario you would need to obtain financing. And banks and other lenders have lots of financial products to help with those various situations.
Well, let me ask this question. I'm a small bank and really don't have much familiarity, not a small bank, but a small business, excuse me. And I've not been in the market before to borrow money. What are some of the keys to being successful to go out when I prepare myself, go out and look for a bank to become my partner, if you will, in my business? What are some of those keys that are important?
That's a great question. I'd say number one, make sure your finances are in order. Be able to present a good, sophisticated financial package to a prospective lender that you're interested in borrowing money from. Regardless of whether that's a bank, whether it's an angel investor, an equity partner, have your finances in order. I strongly recommend to my customers, if you don't have a CPA, get one. And I'd even go a step further. If you don't have, a lot of small businesses don't need necessarily a full-time CFO. At least have a part-time CFO. Somebody maybe you can outsource that piece to, and they can really make you look good to a prospective lender. So have your finances in order, number one. Number two, know what you need to use the money for. Be ready to tell the story about, okay, here's how much I need, and here's what I plan to use it for. If that's a great place to start. If you have both of those things, if you have good financials in order, and you know what you're going after, that's going to put you in a good position.
Well, one of the things I've learned being a Silver Fox advisor for the last 15 years is we actually have some of the Foxes, particularly a man, Dick Hindy, who was a senior management person in a number of banking groups, and he specializes in coming in and helping small businesses prepare themselves, put the package together, and has a really high success rate. Plus, he guides them to the banks that are, prefer those kinds of loans, whatever it is they're looking for.
Right.
So what you're saying is the part-time CFO resonates with me. You need some help on this. It's an important issue in the life of a company.
Absolutely.
And I would recommend, I see if you agree, that you don't go alone.
Absolutely.
Don't go at it alone. Get some outside help.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. It's worth every penny. The outsourced CFO, they work with a lot of banks. They know what banks look for. They know what banks like, and they can really make you look good to a bank. So I couldn't agree with you more.
It makes a lot of sense to me. Let me ask you, one of the things that comes up from time to time, and I'm a person about relationships, whether it be personal relationships, so that when I need help personally or in business particularly, and we just talked about that relationship with a bank. A lot of times I find small business people reluctant to really spend any time, or they really don't know how to do what they need to do to build a relationship with a bank. So that when you need to ask for a loan, or you want to ask, you got that expansion, whatever.
Right.
What do you advise people to do? I'm a small business guy. I know a banker, or I think I might. I mean, where do I start to build a relationship with a banker?
Sure, that's a great question. You really want to find a bank or a banker that you can develop a relationship with, and that's going to be one they need to be someone that's going to be of that mindset and want to take that approach. So, and if you don't know, talk to the existing group of professionals that you as a small business have surrounded yourself with. So, your attorney, your CPA. If you have an outsourced CFO you're already working with, work with them, and they should be able to point you in that direction. But yeah, you absolutely need to find a bank or a banker that is interested in not just helping you with the initial transaction, but is interested in following up with you on a regular basis, continuing to educate themselves about your business, about the challenges and the opportunities that you're faced with, and can then proactively react to any of those changes, because the only constant is change, right? And so you need somebody who's going to be there with you, that you can pick up the phone and call, and you're going to be able to get in touch with them every time. They're going to be accessible to you, and whenever you need something new, you're not going to have to reinvent the wheel, so to speak, and start over from scratch, trying to educate someone from soup to nuts on who you are. If you have a banker that you have a relationship with, they already know who you are. They already know about your business, and they can react much better in those types of situations when you do need something. So a relationship is absolutely crucial. And so I would always advise a small business, whether you think you're going to need to borrow money in the next year or two or not, develop a relationship with a banker now.
Well, and it's one of the things too, I always carry it even a little step further, is I look at a banker or a lender as a part of my trusted advisor group.
Absolutely.
The attorney, the CPA, so on and so forth.
Yep.
And because I can go to them if I have that great relationship and talk to them about my financing, not necessarily not trying to borrow money, but how I'm doing.
Absolutely. Yeah, and a good banker will always take you up on the opportunity to advise you. Even if it's not necessarily making you a loan or getting any business from themselves. Treat them as you just said, as someone that can be an advisor and that can help point you in the right direction.
Well, I think you've drawn a great profile of the kind of banker we need to look for. Let's talk just for a moment about the Small Business Administration. I know that's one of the topics that's coming up most likely in the workshop or the presentation next week. Will be a small business. They have preferred and lenders and others that are not necessarily preferred. But what does that really mean to me as a businessman?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when you have obtained preferred status with the SBA, that essentially means that the SBA you've demonstrated an aptitude for understanding on the front end what the SBA wants to evaluate a transaction, and that you're also able to do the proper follow-up and documentation on the back end. You're documenting that file properly. There's a lot of upfront paperwork that goes into an SBA loan. And so you've demonstrated that, and so what essentially that allows you as an SBA preferred lender to do is just streamline the transaction process. It's a streamlined approval process, and so the bottom line is the real difference is speed. You can get that transaction done more quickly as a preferred lender.
Well, and obviously speed to get it done and out, because the small business, I'm typically wearing many hats. If I own the business, I'm running the business, and doing the loan is kind of an unusual thing, and it can be a little bit challenging to get through that process.
Yeah, absolutely.
One final question I have, and this is one it's one of those, I call them proverbial questions, but I'm starting a business. Mm-hmm. Can I borrow money?
Yeah.
Right?
That is a great question. And the question is, it depends. In some cases, you can. Typically, if you're approaching a bank as a startup business, a bank is going to typically direct you into the SBA process that they have. The SBA is a great tool for lending to startup businesses, and so that's typically going to be the process. Not to say there aren't situations in which a bank would not do conventional financing for a startup business, because there are situations in which that would happen. So that's kind of what it would look like as a bank. There are other options outside of banking for a startup business, be it angel or private investors, and that can run the gamut in terms of how much it's going to cost, how much they'll lend, how much ownership they might require. So there is a sacrifice that you have to give up in exchange for that, but those options are out there as well. So if you're starting up a business, but you or a spouse has outside income that's going to continue during that startup phase, that's another mitigating factor that might open up some additional opportunities. Those are kind of just a few things to think through on that, but it is possible. And I would not deter someone from knocking on doors and just asking that question. If they are in a startup phase and they need funding, it's most likely out there. It just may look a little bit different depending on what their situation is.
Well, it's good to hear that there is a banking possibility if we want to continue with that.
Yep.
Well, I deeply appreciate, again, you taking time to join us today. It sounds like you guys have got I know you've got a great panel. I've looked at the folks that are on the panel. And let's kind of go back through that information. Woodlands Chamber sponsoring, what's the date and time and place?
Yeah, it's going to be April 4th at the Small Business University, and it will be at the Woodlands Chamber, and it will be from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m.
And if you want more information about it, you simply go to the website of woodlandschamber.org. The information's there, and I encourage you. We talked about some of the questions that have come up, and one of the great things I love about these presentations is an open question and answer period. So if you've got your own questions and you're a business guy, you want to be there because you can ask really a panel of professionals and get probably the best perspective you can get for the cost of entry. It's a very inexpensive way to learn.
Should be a wealth of information for sure. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Richard. I appreciate it.
Yep.
And another businessman on the street.
Thank you.
OneBestConsult.com, a community of small business owners where you as an owner can find answers to the most pressing business questions you have. Not sure who to turn to when you have a challenge in your business? Turn to the folks at OneBestConsult.com. That's the number one, bestconsult.com, where you can always find advice you can use based on common sense business experience. Join our community of like-minded business owners at OneBestConsult.com.